Hello, I'm Reverend Michael Mugford, and I'm part of the ministry team at Coal Harbour Woodside United Church, along with the Reverend Krista Elizabeth Wynne, and I'm pleased to be able to share this spiritual reflection with you today. As we begin to see some of the restrictions being lifted and the economy around us opening up, I began to wonder this week how this pandemic experience will affect us in the longer term. We're being cautioned that there will be a second wave and maybe even a third wave if history holds true. There have been plenty of memes on social media that have compared this COVID-19 pandemic to other pandemics in the world. Most often the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 and 1919 and the stories that were told around that. 100 years out from that event, most of those who would have survived are no longer with us, but likely the stories are more numerous than other pandemics in our world, simply because of the beginnings of modern technology at the time, photography, radio, and the sheer number of newspapers covering the event. But it was largely forgotten until around January of this year. It got me wondering, what stories will we tell about this time? What stories will be beneficial, uplifting, and hopeful? And what stories will leave us with ongoing fear or mistrust or even despair? I can't help but think that now is the time for us to consider those options ahead of us. The idea of framing our story has always been part of our faith tradition. Our Jewish forebears told and wrote the stories that witnessed to the world around them, that spoke of their interaction with others in the world, and how they experienced the presence of God in their lives and in the events of their experience. This tradition continued with the parables that Jesus told, the writings of Paul, which are the earliest writings of our Christian scriptures, down to the Gospels, the written rememberings of the accounts from Jesus' life and his ministry decades after the event. We also see the writings of the early church as it wrestled with how our faith would generally be expressed. We see the writings of the mystics and the theologians and how they also tell how our faith has been the lens through which we have interpreted the world's events that has gone on around us. They are the faith stories of our past. In more modern times, we begin to see the rise of the sharing of the personal faith story or testimony. We share our own experiences of God, of Christ, and of the Spirit in our lives. And we talk about the ways in which they have brought us further along in our faith journey as individuals. In sharing them in the community, we hope to lift up God's presence and inspire the lives of others for the benefits of their faith. Our stories are important, and the way we tell them is just as important. In an Alban Institute workshop, presenter Larry Peers talked about needing to, especially in our mainline Protestant traditions, to equip our congregations, our communities of faith, in the sharing of our faith stories, in hearing those faith stories and helping to retell their story so that they might effect positive change in the community of faith. Peers said that Jesus represented an embodied leadership because he didn't just tell the story, he was the story. He was the love of God in the world, and that was his very being. Jesus not only told stories, he was a living embodiment of the story of God. Jesus and his message were integrated, and that is a true definition of incarnation. God's desire for us is that we too are embodied people, being and living our stories with authenticity and hope. For generations, our stories have been the vehicles by which the church has kept the faith, has welcomed the newcomer, has passed on the tradition, and tried to make sense of the world's happenings around them. We are always encouraged as people of faith to tell the stories of Jesus, and so we should, because they lead us deeper into our faith. We shouldn't, however, feel that our stories are any less. Our stories are our lived experiences of faith, and they also reveal God and God's light in us and in the world around us. We can use the stories of our community of faith and our personal stories as vehicles by which we move more deeply into God's presence and more deeply into healthy ways of being, and the ways in which we can be sharers of hope in the world. In the book of Isaiah, God offers all words that tell of God's story, one of hope, one of community, and one of fulfillment of our basic needs. Isaiah writes, "Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you that have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food." In God's story, we are assured that we are cared for, supported in all ways, all times, and all places. And we are called to embody this story for ourselves, for each other, and for the whole of the world. Just some thoughts for today. Peace.